Welcome to another episode of Start the Week with Wisdom. My name is Bridget Burns, and I'm the Executive Director of the University Innovation Alliance.
I'm Doug Lederman, editor and co-founder of Inside Higher Ed.
Each week, I team up with a journalist to have a conversation with a sitting college president or chancellor. And we want to unpack what it's like to experience this moment, what leadership is like, and hopefully to inspire you. We know you're at home, we know things are challenging, but we want to focus a spotlight on the leadership of presidents and chancellors rather than just talking about their institutions or a specific topic in time. So this is Start the Week with Wisdom.
This week, we're delighted to bring a conversation with Winston-Salem State University Chancellor Elwood Robinson, who was previously Provost and Vice President at Cambridge College. Chancellor Robinson, welcome.
I'm excited.
Welcome.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here. I'm glad to be associated with any program about wisdom.
Really want to sort of table set this conversation by getting a sense of kind of how you're holding up right now. Are you, how are you feeling? How are you feeling about your institution and about how the spring is starting off?
I'm feeling really good about where the institution is. We have students back on campus. We were one of the institutions last fall that decided to bring students back to campus. That was extremely challenging, but I think it was rewarding. We learned a lot in preparation for them to come back in the spring. We have students back on campus. Classes started February the 1st. I am doing great, both professionally and also I'm doing great personally as well. Glad to be able to meet the challenges of this pandemic. I think we're doing a great job. We're learning a lot, and I'm trying to stay healthy as much as I can and do the right things.
Well, I wanted to ask how your leadership might have evolved as a result of the past year and going through all of this. Like you as a leader back a year, I think a lot of us are really aware that it's coming up on a year. We're remembering where we were last February. And so who you were and how you led then versus now, can you talk about any changes that you perceive about yourself?
Yeah, well, one of the things I think I learned, throughout this pandemic and the leadership is I've always had the perspective of leading from the heart. And I think that has served me well during the pandemic because it allowed us to do all the things that we need to do to keep people safe, keep the faculty, staff, and all the members, all the constituents associated with Winston-Salem State. And so I learned about that. I also learned that I could push myself into spaces that I had not realized I could push myself. And then I also realized that I had an amazing staff, that it is during crises oftentimes that the real true leadership rises up and you're able to see that. So I learned a lot about my staff and how brilliant, how bright, how creative they were. And now it's giving me the opportunity to say, you've shown me this, then we can take this to even another level as we move into the new year.
Does we focus a lot on the hardships of the pandemic, and you just talked about some of the amazing things that you've seen your colleagues do. Do you see evidence at your institution and among your peers in higher education that there has been that good things have emerged from this, that faculty and staff have innovated in ways that will position your institution potentially more successfully for the long term? Are you seeing lots of silver linings?
Yeah, Doug, thank you for that question. That's a really, really great question as we think about what's happening in higher ed. And those of us who've been in this business for a long time, like the three of us here, understand that higher ed tends to move at a slow pace. And what we have learned during the pandemic is we don't have to always move at that slow pace, that we can move quicker and we can move faster. We can turn things around. Years ago, it would take us, 3 to 5 years to think about putting a substantial online program, and now we can do it in less time. And so we've learned that people can do some amazing things. I am always pleased with the faculty, particularly at Winston-Salem State University, who during the pandemic had to pivot to online. But also we were not in a space of teaching online. We are a face-to-face institution. We believe in that experience that students have when they come on campus. So it was very different from us. We didn't have a big online presence, but faculty and staff during the pandemic, during the summer, participated in training programs and online teaching programs to be able to learn how to do it better, to be able to teach online, to be able to look at our classes and make sure we're teaching them in a way that true learning is taking place in the online environment. And so that was really pleasing for me to see. In the midst of a pandemic, faculty kept doing the things that faculty members do, teaching, research, and community service in ways in which they could during the pandemic. I'm always pleased at the amount of productivity that faculty have done. We went into 2019 saying that we had a goal of bringing in $11 million in sponsored research. The faculty at Winston-Salem State brought in $27.1 million in sponsored research during a pandemic. That's a highlight. That's important. That shows you what faculty can do. And I think for me, it's giving me a deeper appreciation of the faculty from a leader standpoint. So that's one way, Bridget, I think my leadership has changed as a result of that. Understanding that oftentimes we say we do the impossible, and I think that we do, but to be able to see it in action was quite refreshing.
So I'm curious about your leadership journey. As you think back to when you first started as a chancellor, I'm sure that you read all the books and asked for all the advice, but I'm curious if you were to put yourself in a position of being able to travel through time and give advice to yourself walking in on day one. What have you learned from being a chancellor that you wish you'd known that would have helped more when you started?
Well, I think when I thought about being a chancellor, I didn't have a good perspective. If you go through undergraduate school and you think about who's the president or who's the chancellor, you go through graduate school and in postgraduate school, and you never really kind of think about the chancellor, but you understand there's somebody there doing something. And so when I got into the role, I think I was overwhelmed by the sheer magnitude and the sheer number of the responsibilities that a chancellor had. And I wasn't prepared for the focus that's put on a chancellor, particularly at an HBCU, which is, historically a Black college or university in this country. The spotlight is always on the chancellor. I wasn't necessarily prepared for that. And I think if I could go back in time and I could have a conversation, I said, be prepared for that, because I just wasn't.
How does that manifest itself sort of day to day, and in what ways is it either constricting or does it just have you having to think more about I'm just interested in how that affects your day to day life as a chancellor.
Well, one of the things is and my leadership is about the work that we do at Winston-Salem State is really about equity and to making sure that we provide every single student a first-class education. What I believe, and I've said this publicly a lot, that almost every institution in this country educates at a very high level about 10% of those students. And they go and they come and they get a wonderful experience. And I said about 5 years ago when we started our strategic plan that what would happen if we could do that for every single student. So if you're equity minded in terms of how you provide that experience for students, you're also going to be equity minded in terms of how you provide that experience to staff, to your executive team, to people that you work with on a day-to-day basis. What I've tried to do is to shift the focus from the chancellor to those individuals who are really doing the work and to highlight them and let them begin to take credit for the great work that they're doing. Because oftentimes the chancellor is the one who knows the least about certain kinds of things, but the world thinks the chancellor knows everything. So it's about creating spaces for everyone to have their voices heard. We talk a lot about diversity and inclusion, but part of diversity and inclusion is around elevating voices. So what I try to do every day from a leadership standpoint is make sure those voices are heard and those voices are elevated, because then it gives me the kind of perspective that I need. During a pandemic, when you have a team of folks together, and we had a policy team, and when that team met twice a week, every single week, 9 folks on the policy team, each one of those folks have a particular purpose that they serve. at that university, I need to hear from them. I need to hear about the health. I need to hear about mental health. I need to hear about the finances. I need to hear about the physical structures and the facilities and the spaces that we have. So all of those voices are important. And so I try to deal with that in that manner, Doug.
So I'm curious about, you have a unique vantage point, understanding not just how to serve Black students and how to run an HBCU effectively, but you also probably have a sense of what people are missing, what other predominantly white institutions might misunderstand, and how they're kind of not doing what's needed. And particularly in this moment, I'm just wondering, what kind of guidance or advice would you offer to help institutions that actually want to do a better job serving, helping complete, Black students, and I would also add low income students in the midst of this? Like, what are you seeing that you think other predominantly white institutions are getting wrong that you think really needs to be better addressed?
Well, one thing I'll say, Bridget, it is about the spaces that you create. And so when we think about the Winston-Salem State University experience, what that is we want every single student to come and to feel welcome. So we want to create authentic spaces. So you come into these spaces and you see yourself, and you know that we are committed to your well-being, holistic well-being. We know that we think that you're valuable, that you think you're important, and I think that you're a genius. And so in our new strategic plan, we talk about unleashing the genius in every single person. And so when you come to an institution, you want to feel welcome. If you don't feel welcome, then you're going to struggle. So part of this is creating spaces for everybody to have to be themselves and to be authentic, right? Their authentic self. And I think institutions have to do a better job with that across the board, particularly for under-resourced, low-resourced folks that come from communities sometimes in which they are told that they're not valuable, that they're not important, that you got to tell folks that they're more than an SAT score or an ACT score, that they're valuable and they're important. And I think those institutions that are able to elevate those individuals are those institutions that are making a difference. For us, students come to Winston-Salem State University, 70% of those students from families that make less than $75,000 a year. If you think about the challenges that those students face, they come to a university, we want to make them feel special and make them feel unique and make them feel that they're smart and brilliant. And that's what I see every single day. So it's not by accident that students come from Winston-Salem State University, and they come from these communities, sometimes don't have the kind of test scores that some of the other universities have, but they come and they graduate and they get a job and they go out and they make a difference. Institutions today have to be about making that difference. I believe that institutions have to be about preparing students to be able to live a high quality life. And that's more than just getting a job. So I want when students to come to Winston-Salem State University that they don't think about getting a job. I want them to think about creating jobs. The new workforce is about that creation, because every day, 50% of the students that go to universities today, you know this, Bridget, think that they're going to own their own business. They tell us that. So if that's true, we ought to be creating spaces at our universities to have them do just that. That is why in my new strategic plan, I said in 4 years, from 2021 to 2025, I want every student that comes to Winston-Salem State University, when they walk across the stage to get their diploma, they get not only a diploma, but they've created their own job. What a powerful vision that is.
Shifting gears for a sec, you're one of numerous Black college leaders who have emphasized the importance personally of getting a COVID vaccine. You recorded a video, I think it was of you actually getting it, or I can't, yeah. And I guess, why was it important for you to take a visible stance in that way? And do you have a sense so far that it has made a difference for those who might be disinclined? I don't know if you're hearing from people. I was curious when I saw it, is this going beyond preaching to the choir? And I'm curious if you've seen evidence of that, but also just wanted to get a sense of what motivated you to do that.
Oh, Doug, I really hope so. I really hope it's making a difference. The work that I've done in my 35 years in higher education has really been around health and health equity. The work that we do at Winston-Salem State University, our School of Health Science, is one of the premier schools in the country. We go out into the community. We are the only HBCU with a mobile health unit. In fact, we have 2 mobile health units, and we go into hard to reach communities and we do testing. And that's important for us. We partner with the local health agencies to be able to make sure that we are able to serve the needs of underserved populations. And so for me, as Chancellor at Winston-Salem State University, it's vitally important that I lead by example. I mean, one of the things that we talked about earlier with leadership, I believe that leaders lead the way. I can't expect to move the community if I'm unwilling to do something that I think is so important for their well-being. And I understand the challenges that we face in this country in getting minority populations, particularly African Americans, to get vaccinated. And that is because of the historic antecedents that are associated with how they have been treated in the healthcare arena. We know about the studies that have been done on African American males and even African American women across this country. And so for me, I know there's a lot of skepticism in certain communities. And I want to try to reduce that by demonstrating that these vaccines are safe, these vaccines are necessary if we are going to beat this virus. So I want to lead by the way. I hope you ask me if it is indeed making a difference. I think that it is. I hear from people, I hear from students. I think we are making a difference.
So I want to get back to the kind of day-to-day challenge that you're experiencing as a chancellor. Now, in a virtual world, well, first, just in general leadership, it's always very hard to connect yourself with folks who are going to be honest with you and candid with you and give you the kind of feedback that allows you to be, informed by a 360 perspective as a leader. And I'm curious how you balance that out in a Zoom world. Because it's, you don't have those side water cooler conversations or, hey, let me grab you at the end of the meeting and let you know this information. So that I want to hear about that. But I also how are you managing to keep your eye focused on the right work rather than being caught up in the chaos of the day? So can you talk to us about tactically how you set yourself up to do that as a chancellor?
Yeah, two parts to this. One is when you're in a crisis and when you're in a storm, all you're doing is managing the crisis and managing the storm. If, for example, you talk about 2019 being a year of a pandemic, we're managing the crisis, managing the storm. Nobody's paying attention to the future, or nobody's thinking what's going to happen kind of post-COVID, for example. What does a post-COVID world look like? And so from a leadership standpoint, at about probably May, I looked around, I said, we're working every day to manage this crisis. We're not thinking about what's going to happen. So I put together a team of individuals that we just sat down and we had discussions about, what's next. So keeping our eyes both on the crisis, but simultaneously thinking about what's the future going to look like. Now we can do that in a variety of ways. In a virtual world, it's probably easier to do that than it was when we weren't in that space. For example, I would probably not be on your show if it wasn't for this pandemic. And so you can reach out to people across the country and have deep conversations. You're on the West Coast, and I'm having a great conversation with you on a Monday morning about higher ed. I can have those conversations. Most of us said we need to be in those spaces created. I have a wonderful show called Future Focus Now that we do every Tuesday at 7 p.m. where I have some great, wonderful, dynamic people come on and we have great discussions about what's going on. I had Dr. Fauci on my show. Can you believe that? I had Dr. Fauci on my show, Bridget. How cool is that?
That's amazing. Did you know somebody or that's just, wow.
Yeah, it's one of those things in terms of we talk about, how you lead. And I tell folks that we do the impossible every single day. So someone asked me, how did you get Dr. Fauci on your show? I said, you would be surprised. I ask.
That's great. Yeah, that's awesome. Also, we didn't even have a show pre-COVID, right? Like there wasn't anything like, it wasn't happening. So you're right. So many opportunities.
I'm interested. Did I hear you say, did you create essentially a new strategic plan last year during I mean, you described a 21 to 25. Did you revise a plan? Because that's really interesting. I'm not sure I have heard a lot of places talk about that.
So one of the things that, and it's amazing how excited I am about the new strategic plan. We are in the last year of a 5-year strategic plan that really paid tremendous dividends for Winston-Salem State University. We charted an amazing course. And so we began preparing for the new strategic plan in 2019. So that's where we are now in thinking about that. What's next for WSSU? So we were delayed a little bit because of all the challenges, but we're right on course to be able to, roll out our new strategic plan this year. We want to roll it out on September the 28th, which is the day in which we were chartered as a university in 1892. We're going to roll out that plan. I tell you, Doug, I am so excited about the direction that we're going at WSSU.
That's great. I think that's super important for folks to be thinking about, because otherwise all of the strategic plans that most folks are operating on were written who knows when, and they've been sitting on a shelf, and they're not informed by this kind of the world that we're in and all the changes that are happening. So I guess the question I would like to end on with you is just what do you hope sticks from this moment beyond what you've talked about? What do you hope shifts long term that will help us be better at serving students, that will be better help us do what's right in the long run for society and for our students?
Yeah, I hope that we will stay laser focused on diversity and inclusion, and making sure that we treat every student, we help them maximize their fullest potential, and we stay laser focused on that. Not the politics, not some of the cultural kinds of machinations sometimes we find ourselves getting involved in, but looking at almost student by student and saying, we're going to provide you with this wonderful educational experience, and that we leave no one out. The reason why diversity is important, because it leaves no one out. It says that everybody should have access. Everybody who wants a high quality education should have access to it. And we should prepare our universities to receive those individuals. Oftentimes, you've seen it, I know you've seen it in the universities that you serve. Sometimes we invite folks to our universities, but we don't welcome them. We don't create those spaces for them. So we got to do more than just invite someone to the table. It's just like when I was talking about my leadership team. It's not enough for me just to invite them to the table and to hear their voices, but also to take those voices and bring about significant change. We can do that in higher education. We've been slow to do that, but I think if nothing else, I think this pandemic has shown the fact that we have to do better at it. It's shown the fact if we're going to have better race relations in this country, that we got to pay particular attention to it in terms of how we're serving folks. So I hope we learn some strong lessons doing this that I think that will serve us well. And I think we have, and I look forward to it. I think we have a great future ahead of us. I hope that we continue to be hopeful. That's what I want, because when we give up on hope, then there's not a lot left.
Yeah, that's great. In terms of folks should be, trying to position them for optimism so that they can do their best work. So, well, thank you so much, Chancellor Robinson. I really appreciate you taking the time to be here with us today to inspire us and to inspire all of higher ed who are joining us. So, and Doug, from your childhood bedroom, really giving us a window into who you were and how you got to where you are.
Yeah, the orange shag carpet is gone from the 40 plus years ago, but nice to be back. Nice to be back with my folks. So that's a blessing. So great to see you, Chancellor Robinson.
Good.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great week.